For interviews on educational technology and for a list of our educational technology workshops, please visit www.edtechlive.com. To join in the discussion on School 2.0, please visit www.school20.net. And for discounted Dell computers, please visit our sponsor, www.k12computers.com.
It's an intensely exciting world that we live in, and I think that teaching children about that world should be just as exciting. First time in history, we're preparing kids for a future that we cannot clearly describe. We have no idea what their work experience is going to be like, what their life experience is going to be like, what their social experience is going to be like. We don't have any kind of firm target to aim our curriculum at like we did when I was in school.
Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and it's Friday, February 9th, 2007. Today my guest is David Warlick. Thanks for talking with me, David.
Hello, everybody.
David, would you give a little bit of your own background? I don't know much about what you've done in the past and would be interested in knowing more about you.
Well, it spans back about 31, 32 years. I think that it's important, and I mention this to a lot of my audiences, that I started teaching in 1976. And of course, it was another year before the Apple II, the original Apple II, was invented. So when I entered education as a classroom teacher, computers, desktop computers, just they weren't part of our conversation. They weren't part of our any of our notions of what education, teaching, the classroom was about or was going to be about for the next 30 years. I mean, basically. I still lived in a time when I had every reason to believe that I would be doing the same thing the same way for the next 30 years for my entire career, and there was no reason to think that anything different would be happening. Then about, I guess it was about 4 or 5 years later, I saw my first Radio Shack Model 1 computer. And got a chance to operate it in some sort of reading class I was taking for recertification. And that afternoon, I became, two things happened. One was I became seduced by the possibilities, just the sheer possibilities of a machine that you operated by communicating with it. And the second thing that happened was I was a history teacher, and I'd always taught history. I didn't know it at the time, but I taught history from the perspective of technologies. I always talked about the steam engine affected culture in these ways, and the automobile affected culture in these ways, going all the way back to the Bowen era affecting culture in these ways. And that afternoon when I operated that computer, I felt that this was going to be one of those machines, one of those technologies that was going to change culture. So I was seduced and talked the principal into buying a computer, and and I taught myself how to program. Took it home over the summer, taught myself how to program in BASIC. We got the next year we got 11 Radio Shack Model 3s. These were hot machines. 16 kilobytes. That was hot back then. And I got all 11 of the computers in my classroom because none of the other teachers had any interest in them. And continued to program and continued to just sort of experiment with the possibilities of creating learning experiences for the students. But a couple of years later, I went to a small school district, rural school district in northern North Carolina as a computer resource teacher, what they were called then, and then became director of technology for that school district. And then do you know Al Rogers?
I don't.
He spoke at a conference in North Carolina in 1987 about this Fred mail thing that he had developed, where basically you had Apple IIe computers all over the country and in Europe and Australia that were programmed to dial each other up at night and pass messages back and forth. So teachers were dialing in with 300 and 1200 baud modems were dialing into computers in their central offices, and there were only maybe 2 or 3 dozen of these around the world, but they would call into a bulletin board service and leave messages, and they could address the messages to teachers who were using other bulletin boards in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. And then in the middle of the night, these computers would all start calling each other and passing these messages back and forth. So what I typed in one morning would be received by my teacher friend in Miller, Australia, the next morning, and they would send a reply, and I would get their reply the next morning. And this, in 1987, was absolutely amazing. The State Department of Education got real interested in Raleigh, got real interested in experimenting with this, and called me up and asked if I would be willing to help them pilot it. So we were up to at one point 37 nodes in North Carolina, with teachers who were having their classes write reports and messages and ask questions and pass weather data across the state and across the country and places in South America and Australia using 300 and 1200 baud modems. And it was one of those times, it was the computer at first, and then when we discovered modems and telecommuting is what we called it then, telecomputing was what we called it then, and this was another sort of surge in excitement in the possibilities of what you could do in classrooms to help kids develop communication skills and thinking skills and so on. And then so I worked for the State Department of Ed after that for about 6 years, and the last year and a half that I was there, I discovered HTML and taught myself HTML and built the website, the original website for the Department of Ed. It was the first State Department of Education website in the nation. And then about that time, things were getting kind of shaky at the Department of Ed. There was downsizing going on and all sorts of things. So I left them in '95 and have been basically trying to make a living without a job for the last 11, 12 years. So how's that?
That's great. You said that you recognized that this is a technology that would change culture. So I guess a question that a lot of people ask right now is, I think we recognize that it certainly has changed culture. Has the computer changed education, or has it changed learning?
No and yes. Largely, it has not changed education. In fact, I think those early years, 1987 to 1995, really, well, on up into around 2000, it was much more exciting then than it is now, I think, because there weren't quite as many teachers who were doing it. People weren't paying quite as much attention to them, and there was a lot of freedom then to really experiment and take risks and drop the standards for a month and try this new technology to give kids a chance to talk to other kids in other parts of the world. I mean, we had more freedom then to really experiment, and I think there was, at that time, there was more of a sense that things were going to be changing than there have been over the last 6 or 8 years. So my answer to that question is it really hasn't changed education all that much. However, the second question was, has it changed learning? And that is certainly the case. I'm learning differently. You're learning differently. The kids are learning differently. Many teachers are learning differently. It's just that we aren't teaching any differently.
So that was a little bit of a loaded question, because I thought I knew what you would say, and you did.
Did I disappoint you?
No, you said exactly what I thought you would, and I'm intrigued by that. Last night here in Santa Cruz, I came to Santa Cruz to attend a public meeting on school reform in Santa Cruz. And there were about 200 people there. And I thought it was really a great idea to bring people together and actually talk about changing schools. Does any of the new technology, or what we're calling the read-write web technology, or Web 2.0, does any of it hold an opportunity to actually begin a larger cultural dialogue about education?
Well, it's certainly facilitating a lot more dialogue than we were participating in 2-3 years ago. There are more teachers who are talking. They're daring to suggest alternatives to how we should be teaching. I think also, and this is really, I believe, maybe the more powerful pivotal point, and that is the kids. The kids are engaged in a different conversation. They are engaged in a different style of learning. They are much more engaged in information. With information. Their experience is centered around information. What they spend their time doing is all about communication, and it's all about accessing information, and it's all about interacting with information. Now, they're interacting with pictures on a TV or on a computer. It's video games. It's MySpace and things like that. But it's an information intense experience that they are engaged in, and I believe it is an intense learning experience. These video games in particular, I think, are learning engines. You cannot achieve in a video game unless you learn something. And so, I think that we're just beginning to realize the learning potentials and the learning experiences that they're engaged in, and realizing, I believe, that if we don't adapt to their new learning skills, that we are going to become increasingly meaningless, irrelevant to them, and that scares me.
I know that I've talked to some people about some of the things that you've just said, and the older generation, and they will say or respond, well, those kids know a little about a lot of things, but there's no self-discipline, there's no real deep scholarship study. How do you respond to that?
Well, I agree. I'm one of those older people, and I agree. What they are learning is largely not valuable, with the exception of problem-solving skills. I think that they're probably developing some problem-solving skills and communication skills that are going to be useful to them in the future. But I would agree with that they aren't engaged in substantive learning, and that's why they still need us. I think they are learning how to play the information. What we have to teach them how to do is how to work the information, how to accomplish real goals with the information, how to create a real context for the world that they live in, rather than just building the context through their MySpace websites and so on. So that's our job, is to take advantage of these learning skills and these learning opportunities, but use those opportunities to help them to develop a real sense of the world that they live in, and the part that they play in that world, and the time that they live in.
So what kind of changes would you envision would need to take place in public education in order for that to happen?
You want the realistic or the out there? The way out there?
I think probably both.
Well, I see a lot of promise. I have seen a lot of promise in the last few months. I am seeing, for one thing, I'm seeing a lot more excitement at educational technology conferences. I mean, this is practically where I live, is educational technology conferences, and I'm seeing some real excitement there that I haven't seen in quite a few years. Part of it is because of this Web 2.0. And it's not just because it's Web 2.0. It's that things are changing, things are moving, things are new. I have the exactly the same feeling right now that I had in the early '90s when we were starting to play with Telnet and Gopher and these sorts of new communication and information tools that people realized that these things were going to change things. These new opportunities were going to have a big impact on us, this internet, this World Wide Web. And I feel the same way right now. And I don't know if Web 2.0 is going to have as much impact as World Wide Web has, but there's a sense among educators who are paying attention. There's a sense of excitement again, and that's very encouraging. And I'm also encouraged by reports that have been published recently. There's a sense that we're beginning to realize that the highly regimented, standards-based education may not be as perfect for our kids as we thought. And I don't have anything against standards. I don't have anything against regimentation to a certain degree. It's just that I think that what we're going to have to do, we're going to have to empower teachers to do whatever it takes to retool their classrooms. We've got to, education it always has been a very isolating experience for teachers. And I think that it has perhaps been even more so over the last almost decade. And I think that we have to free teachers. We have to provide them with the resources. We have to provide them, probably more than anything else, with the time to retool their classrooms, to reflect, to experiment, to take risks, to fail every once in a while. But it's the blog entry that I wrote the other day that you commented on. I think that one of the characteristics of this school 2.0 is not necessarily that it's going to be a new structure or it's going to be a new set of procedures or whatever. What it's going to be is a new learning environment that is free to change, that is flexible, that can adapt to rapidly changing times. But it's going to take teachers who are the instructional leaders of their classrooms to do that.
Was that your realistic appraisal or your out there one?
I guess both. We aren't going to make it otherwise unless we free and empower teachers, unless we give them the time, unless we give them the flexibility, unless we give them the tools that they need and access to real information. We're not going to make it. That's what I believe.
Do you think that is realistic? Do you think that the school system as it currently is structured can allow for that kind of a change?
I think it can if it realizes that it doesn't have any choice, and that's what I believe. I don't think we have any choice. We can't hold on any longer. There's just too many other places in the world that are letting go. Our real competition right now, I think, is the third world, because there are countries that are inventing education from scratch. Brazil, for instance, problem solving is an explicit part of their curriculum. I mean, it's something that they teach every day because they realize that this is, that this is a 21st century skill. Parts of China, Hong Kong are pushing toward project-based learning. When I was in Hong Kong a few years ago, they had a program going on. It was called the Quality Education Fund, where they were giving teachers, I can't remember the exact amounts, but large amounts of money to engage in projects. And the weirder the project, the more likelihood they were to get the funding. The first time that I was there. Yeah, it was the first time that I was there. The first afternoon I was there, they were having a convention of the teachers who had gotten this funding. And each of the teachers got a booth. It was sort of an exhibit hall sort of thing. And each teacher got a booth, and they were demonstrating their projects. And I remember one particular project, the one that impressed me the most, was a teacher who they turned her classroom into a pinhole camera. They covered up all the windows in the classroom except for one little hole, and they covered it up, and then they put unexposed film on the opposite wall. And then they opened up the hole for a certain amount of time, closed it up again, took the exposed film down, developed it, and then made a collage, a photograph of the outside of the classroom. But they integrated math in because they had to calculate the aperture, the exposure time, the angles. They integrated science in because they learned about optics, they learned about chemistry, they integrated social studies in because they learned about the history of photography, they learned about the cultural and social impact of photojournalism. They integrated writing in because every student was required to write a technical manual on how to turn a classroom into a pinhole camera. You know, these are the sorts of activities that their departments of education are pushing toward. And I think that we have no choice but to let go and realize that simply being able to read and write and do basic math are not anywhere near sufficient to being prosperous and cooperative in the 21st century. And we're realizing that. We're talking about 21st century skills now, and we're talking about getting past just the basics. And so that's why I'm encouraged. But I think it could happen if we realize that we don't have a choice.
In the School 2.0 manifesto that we posted, you wrote that education in the 21st century is entirely about conversation. Do you want to explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. I got to think about it a minute. Well, there are several reasons why I think we need School 2.0 or the new school, or we need to reform and restructure education. And one is we live in a time of rapid change. Basically, one of the points that I'll make in some of my talks is that for the first time in history, we're preparing kids for a future that we cannot clearly describe. We have no idea what their work experience is going to be like, what their life experience is going to be like, what their social experience is going to be like. We don't have any kind of firm target to aim our curriculum at, like we did when I was in school. I mean, I could look at my dad and feel like I was looking at my future. His lifestyle, his work experience, I felt like I was looking at my future and looking at my dad. Well, those days are gone. And so for that reason, we need an education system that is as adaptable as the world that we're teaching our kids about and preparing our kids for. And I don't see that happening in 5-year-old documents and in 5-year-old curriculums and standards and 5-year-old textbooks, and I don't see that the kind of flexibility that we need in our classrooms coming from published documents. I think it has got to come from ongoing empowered conversations, knowledge building, skill building conversations that happen face-to-face in the hall, that happen over keyboards, through blogging, through podcasting, through social networks, and whatever these evolve into. I mean, this is this year's structure of the communication environment that we're becoming accustomed to. I have no idea what it's going to look like. Well, I have a couple ideas of what it's going to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. I think video games are a place that we need to be paying attention to. I think that what the textbook evolves into. I mean, we definitely want a digital textbook, but what can you do with a digital network textbook that we haven't imagined yet? How do you turn a textbook into a conversation? Virtual. I can't do. What is a Second Life? I can't do Second Life. I'm not wired for it. All I do is fall down, and it's not very pretty. When I do it, I can't do it. However, I see younger people using it. I see my son in World of Warcraft, and what I would love to see is basically a sandbox or like a virtual sandscape that kids can go to and play. My son, Halo. They got bored with Halo 2 weeks after he bought it, but they kept going there and making up their own games, and eventually creating sets and making movies in this environment. And I could see I called it a sandscape, like a sandbox, but it's just a whole landscape of sand that kids can go build in and play. But in the process of playing, build places, build machines, and in essence, do it together through conversation. I kind of got off subject there, didn't I?
No, I think you've addressed it in a very thoughtful and interesting way, and it's reminding me of a lot of what I think John C. Brown was describing in an interview I had with him, where the real learning took place after the lecture when the kids were talking with each other about what the lecture was about. And then he also talks about just the fact that these new technologies allow for tinkering, where you can play around, and that's a relatively significant part of learning is getting in and participating and tinkering.
Let me just tell one thing here. There was this a project that we did when I was at the State Department of Ed in Raleigh. It was called Vote Line, and we conducted the project approaching one of the elections, and I think it was who did Clinton run against? Bush, right? Elder Bush. Well, it was during that election, and essentially we developed spreadsheets, AppleWorks spreadsheets on Apple IIe's, where students would study the literature on the election, the campaign issues and so on, and they would come up with a list of what they thought were the important campaign issues, and then they would put that in the spreadsheet. And then they would go out and do surveys in the community on how people felt about these issues. Whether they were, it was usually a yes or no sort of question, and then they would continue to study the campaigns to determine how the candidates felt about the issues, and they weighted how strongly Clinton was in favor of this and Bush was opposed to it, or how strongly Bush was in favor and Clinton wasn't quite as much in favor. But anyway, there was a weighting scale that they applied, and then with all this information in the spreadsheet, they were projecting the outcome of the election. Now, the activity, I realize now that the activity, its value was in these conversations that they were having with the issues of the election, with the members of their community, with each other as they were trying to decide what weight to give the people. And the indicator to me of the success of that project was when teachers were coming back together and they were saying, my kids are walking out of the classroom continuing to talk about what we were talking about in class. They are continuing the conversation as they walk out of the class, and we have never seen our children do that before.
So what technologies do you really like?
I think by far the one that I'm most excited about is blogging. because it's purely about communication. It's purely about conversation. I think that's the magic of it. I hear from teachers who are using Class Blogmeister who are saying that their kids are begging them for writing assignments. They can't get the kids to stop writing, and they're blogging at home, and they're blogging during lunchtime and during recess, and I think that the reason is that it stops being a writing assignment. When students are writing in their blog, knowing that it's going to be read by classmates, it's not just the teacher, and knowing that their classmates are going to be responding to it, it stops being a writing assignment and it becomes a communication assignment. It becomes, a conversation. So I think there's enormous power in blogging in that it is about conversation. It's about person to person, person to group, skill and content and knowledge building conversations, and it's so simple. I mean, it's so incredibly unimpressive to see it in action. But for that reason, there's just so many different places that you can take it. Wikis are cool for their own things. Wikis are good for collaborative document building, and I'm increasingly excited about social documents like Writely or Google Docs and the spreadsheet and so on. Podcasting has a huge cool factor. But I'm still more excited about blogging because it's so much more accessible. Podcasting takes preparation and editing, and there's a lot of technology involved. Blogging, there's no technology. It's just conversation. It's just you and the person you're talking to and the message that you're trying to convey. What did I leave out? Social bookmarks I think should be huge for teachers and librarians. I see social bookmarks as being just enormously helpful to them in creating their own personal digital library of resources. I don't see a whole lot of application for it right now for students. I think it's going to have to become a little more specialized. But I see that as being a huge benefit to teachers. What did I leave out?
I think you did a fine job, and clearly the message coming through for you is that blogging is the one that's so accessible and so potentially transforming.
Yes.
How do you help encourage teachers or administrators who naturally fear these technologies to start something like blogging in the classroom?
The benefits are obvious. When I first started presenting blogging to teachers 2 years ago, before I really even knew what it was, I still didn't understand the full potential of blogging even then. But when teachers were seeing blogging, light bulbs were going off. They instinctively saw the power of blogging in that you were giving students voice to what they were learning. So I don't think it's hard to convince them of the value and the benefit of blogging. Now the fearfulness is there's not a whole lot that I can do there, but wait for this to die down. I mean, this is temporary. This is temporary. We're going to get over MySpace, and we're going to get over a lot of what's going on. And I think I worked with Nancy Willard a couple of weeks ago at National School Boards Association Leadership Conference. And it was a great opportunity for me to talk with her, to have some conversation, to learn about what's going on in the world of internet safety. And the one thing that I walked away with that I think impacted me the most is that the very worst thing that we can do in protecting our children is overreact. the very best thing that we can do is to engage in ongoing conversations with our children about their online experience, about their information experience, both to show our interest, to learn from it, and to continue to protect them from the dangers that are certainly there. And if we overreact, then our children are going to be less likely to confide their experience in us because they're going to be afraid, well, they're going to overreact. They don't understand what it is. They're going to overreact, so I'm just going to keep it a secret. So I think we got to become mature about it and do everything that we can to preserve the conversation that we need to be having with our kids.
I really like that perspective. Recently, Will Richardson and I had, a discussion about blogging, and Will's conclusion was that, in order to really feel the benefit of blogging, you have to personally experience it. So he's shifted almost entirely to teaching teachers about using blogging as a professional development tool, and doesn't really even talk about bringing it into the classroom. And I think his theory is that once they experience the benefits themselves personally, they'll want to bring it to their students. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Although, although there are a lot of teachers who are using Class Blogmeister. That's where my experience is. Who are not blogging themselves. Who, again, I think teachers almost instinctively are going to see the value of blogging. In giving students an opportunity to have conversations about what they're learning, to share and to grow, with each other's ideas. But that makes that does make a lot of sense. That just from what you said about the professional development. I mean, Will says all the time, and I've had exactly the same experience where I've learned more in the last couple of years. My learning curve has been more of a constant incline for the last 2 years than any other time in my professional life, because I've been engaged in these conversations with people like Will and like Chris Lehman, and I better stop there because I'll leave lots of people out that I shouldn't. But just learning from what they're seeing, learning from what they're experiencing, learning from where they take what I have to say. I mean, I put ideas out there, and even when people disagree, perhaps especially when people disagree, I learn from their reactions to the ideas that I put out there, and I learn from the reactions that I have for other people, what other people are saying. It's a staff development engine, I think, engaging in these conversations. Now, again, teachers need to be freed to take advantage of it. They need more time to engage in the conversation.
I spent last week at Science Leadership Academy running some workshops, and I have to tell you, I walked away just floored. And it wasn't for what I expected, because all of the things I expected were there and were very positive. But the integration of Moodle in the learning environment to me was just stunning. And I took some videotapes, and I'm going to plan to post on that. But I was really impressed with the whole with the level of engagement by both students and teachers, and especially the use of Moodle in that way. Let's give you a chance to plug Class Blogmeister. Would you let people know where to go to sign up and what the requirements are?
I'll tell you the URL. It's Class Blogmeister, ClassBlogmeister.com. And It was the first blogging engine. I built it in 2004 because there weren't any opportunities for classrooms to blog, for students to blog in such a way that the teacher could control the content, could control the comments that were coming in, could oversee what students were writing and what was going out there. So I built it as a tool. That could help teachers who wanted to experiment in it, and of course now there are others. Alan November's Learning Communities, I think, is what it's called. EPALS has one, Gaggle has one. There's one called MB, and to be absolutely honest, I would urge people to go to those others because Class Blogmeister is, it was built because I felt like we needed something like that. I'm not a professional programmer. I'm on the road, obviously, a lot, and the teachers who are using it understand that it can be buggy, but what it is about conversation. If I can go back to that concept, what I get out of Class Blogmeister is that as teachers have ideas on how it can be improved. I get an email, a teacher says, I really like this aspect of it, but if I could do this, then I would be able to do this with my class. And then other people say, yeah, that's a great idea, because there's a mailing list involved. And so if I agree, then I will go in and add that feature to Blogmeister. So I'm learning about blogging in the classroom from what teachers are asking me to do with Class Blogmeister. Now, what happens is, if you've ever done any programming, when you add code to fix this thing over here, it always breaks something else over there. So there's always a couple of weeks of debugging that goes on. But again, I'm learning from what teachers are asking for, and they have a voice in how this tool works and how it evolves. Right now, I'm at, I looked at it this morning. I got 63,000 users on Class Blogmeister. And it's absolutely free. It's absolutely free, except for there's a handful of teachers who are donating to my Starbucks card.
You need to know that I am really in awe of your ability to do that. And you built Class Blogmeister. I know you built Hitchhiker.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you've built like that?
Well, I enjoy programming. I mean, I have the same joy in programming that I had playing with Legos when I was 9 and 10 years old. Exactly the same joy. And some of the other ones that I've built, Citation Machine is a tool that allows teachers and students, if they're doing research and they need to cite a resource, they can come to this website and indicate whether they want MLA, APA. I've got Chicago on there now, and a couple of them I can't even pronounce. And you just select whatever type of style you need, and then what the resource is. Is it a book? Is it an email message? Is it a website? You click that, and it gives you a web form, and you fill in the information that it asks for, the author's name, the title of the book, or whatever, and it takes all that information and puts it together into a standard citation. So all the student or the teacher has to do is copy the citation, paste it into the bibliography, and that website, the end of the semester, it's hit particularly hard. And the end of this last semester in November, it was getting more than 900,000 page views a day.
That's pretty amazing. And in some ways, I think there's an integrity, or it's very interesting to me, because the very things that you're talking about, students becoming engaged in, you're personally very engaged in.
Was that a question?
No, it was just a statement. It did occur to me there was one Web 2.0 tool probably that you would have wanted to include, and that would be RSS. Yeah,
yes. I guess that's the one that excites me the most. I mean, but it's really the glue that holds everything else together. I think that is the real magic. In fact, I do a presentation called "The Magic of the New Web," RSS, because you have all of these different tools that are communicating with each other. For my presentations, I use a wiki for my online handouts. But when I start the presentation, I suggest tags to members of the audience. So if members of the audience are blogging, I ask them to include those tags in their blogs. And the online handouts has a little aggregator built in, so it's taking blogs written by people in the audience and including it in the online handouts. They're where I need lists of links, so I'll put them into Delicious, and I've got a little aggregator inside of the wiki that is aggregating in the website. So it's all dynamic. It's all about conversation. It's all about all these things that are connected together. And of course, RSS is the magical conduit that makes all of that possible. Yeah, RSS is very cool.
David, I know you're getting ready to go to China. Are you visiting Jeff Utek there?
Exactly. I'm going to work for a week with Jeff in the Shanghai American School. They are having a technology conference. I think they're calling it a Technology Fest for the two schools, and I'll be doing some presentations, doing an opening presentation, and also working with the staff and working with some of the administrators in the tech team. He's working me pretty hard. And plus, I get to try all kinds of really strange foods.
Say, I really appreciate your taking the time today, and I'm going to wish you safe travels. Is there anything that you would have wanted to have communicated today that we didn't talk about?
No, we pretty much covered it, and it's just again, it is an exciting time, I think, to be an educator, and I think a lot of educators are beginning to realize that. And it should be. I mean, it's an intensely exciting world that we live in, and I think that teaching children about that world should be just as exciting.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
The post-show commentary with Terrain Lane was so interesting that I have retained it and included it here.